Yeah. I actually don't know how to stream. I should be able to stream to social media, but it I haven't been able to work it out. So anyway, it's not streaming. It's all good. Morning, Julie.
Good morning.
Up the right way.
Yeah.
Right way up now.
She's from the land down under. Oh no.
Sorry, I'm just trying to. This has got a different sort of. I'm trying to place it nicely. I'm at my son's house, so I'm makeshift kind of. And,
No
and I
worries.
was turning it sideways, and it went upside down. So
There you go.
There's a challenge every day with these things, isn't there?
There is a challenge every day.
And you know what? We're just so used to it now. You watch somebody, we'll just have a good laugh while someone's upside down, back front, trying to get their headphones untangled.
Yeah, I seen yesterday I seen a post yesterday. The Zoom calls are like the modern seance. Are you there? Are you there? Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
You dropped out. You're muted. You're frozen.
I thought that was quite funny. You there on the other side?
Yeah,
Anyway, it was a bit of light humor around Zoom calls.
definitely.
I've just been getting the practice of just dropping in with gratitude for the start of pretty much all of my sessions that I run, even masterminds or men's circles or whatever it is. So I'll drop in with mine. We're obviously in lockdown at the moment, which has been extremely frustrating for me. But I'm just grateful. We've got really bad fires in Perth at the moment. Like 80 houses burnt down last night. So it's it's just really out of control. They're really struggling to get a control of that.
People have just had enough of being told what to do, haven't they? Really, that's the whole thing. I think.
Yeah, well, that's got nothing to do with the fires, Julie. But
Right. Well, you've just disappeared.
sorry.
You just muted yourself, Corey.
Yeah, sorry.
Good
There we
job.
go. I'm back.
You said it's.
I'm just going to drop you guys on mute while I.
Already on mute.
There you go. All right. So basically, there's lots of fires going on in Perth at the moment, which are just really like, I guess touched my heart yesterday, and like really made me realise that I was just being an ungrateful shithead, really, given the circumstances that I'm in at the moment. I've got a beautiful home. I've got a beautiful family. I've got food. I have everything that I could possibly want as a human being. So I was just really in this state of disconnection and lack of gratitude. So I guess I've really just stepped back into that space of gratitude and connected up with a friend to try to get together and get school materials for all those kids that kind of lost everything. So yeah, I'm just really grateful for this ability to be able to communicate, even though we're in lockdown, and this just having a beautiful family and having, I don't know, I had like 9 hours sleep last night. I can't remember the last time I had 9 hours sleep ever in the history of sleep for the last 5 years anyway. So just really grateful for feeling refreshed today across so many different aspects of my soul being. So yeah, that's what I'm grateful for.
It's amazing what a good night's sleep does to the mind, isn't it?
Do you want to share your gratitudes, Julie?
Oh, I just did. I thought, hang on. Right, where am I? Why am I muted?
You're not muted, Julie.
Oh, I'm not. Okay, that's fine then. God, I'm still. Hang on. Now I've lost the meeting, and I'm falling down. Yeah. Sorry, I can't. I've lost you again. Hang on.
We can still hear you, Julie.
Oh, that's good. Okay, back to the meeting. Right, I'm fine. What did you say? Sorry, I was just making the comment about a night's sleep because I have a lot of sleep. I have sleep apnea, chronic. So, but I have a machine, and I received my first good night's sleep about 2.5 years ago, and I woke up a different person. It was quite amazing. So I'm very grateful for my little machine when it comes to sleep. Yeah, I didn't realise the Perth fires are the normal sort of ones that happen every year, or the Australian, or where they started.
I'm not really sure. I don't kind of dive into it. Like, there's so many rabbit holes you can go down of people starting fires, etc. But I'll just kind of sit
Yeah.
with the space that they're in rather than worrying about too much about what
Yeah.
caused it. It's just more about, I guess, just sending love out to that
Yeah.
space and doing what we can do to kind of support them. Is kind of the space that I've dropped into, really.
That's a good space to drop into. Yeah, very good. Yeah, well, I'm just really getting into everything in this group, and this whole Gold Star, Noble Gold Star, and really loving the whole process. So I'm incredibly grateful at the moment, and a long way to go before I feel like I can contribute much. But at the moment, I'm incredibly grateful to have this. Just the whole feel of it is just amazing. So and watching people making so much progress also, and not their own things of belonging, which is what it's all about, really, isn't it? Connecting with people and feeling the love as such.
Yeah, I think that there's enormous just opportunity in this space of Noble Goldman without even exploring any of the other stuff. Personally, I feel like there's too much noise in Noble Goldman as a collective, but it's certainly creating enormous value and opportunities over time as it builds and grows. It's certainly going to create enormous opportunities. I know myself has had massive expansion, growth, change, so many different things. And I think a lot of that's because of the people that we've been connecting with, and on these calls and the Gold Star calls have really been exponential. Just that exploration of outwitting the devil for like 13 weeks, and then 13 weeks of exploring the universal laws, the forgotten universal laws. As doing that as a collective, I think is so much more powerful than sitting and reading a book on your own. And to me, that's worth $200 US a year straight off the bat. Like I said to Martin, like I've already spent 20 grand on the personal development I've done over the past 6 months quite easily with coaches and different masterminds and things that I've been a part of. So it's pretty amazing opportunity, really. What do you?
I think unfolding is a gradual thing, and you keep building, and you can't know one thing until something else is kind of settled within you before you can see the next part. And so therefore, I have looked at a lot of those laws or similar things for years. I've been in a personal development, what would you call it? Tourist. No, well, whatever, but bouncing from one thing to another and always searching. But that was a whole new, I only came in at the end. So I'm going to have to go through and do those again because I thought they were marvellous. But it wasn't so much the reading of it that was marvellous. It was the actual coming together and discussion of it, and the views that people, found and when they were reading them that you wouldn't have considered even looking at. And that's the power, isn't it? That you get all these different, beautiful sort of views from different filters, and it's really opens up your own vision, which I yeah.
All right, thanks, Julie. We're going to drop on the stand now. Thanks.
Oh, stubby fingers. Yeah, so I suppose I'm just grateful that I suppose it was lots of learning. We went into lockdown and I was doing learning anyway, but I was able to pick up a bunch of stuff that I masterminds that I don't normally get to because work was on, and kind of touch bases with some other groups, some coaching groups, because they're running evenings, and I was able to kind of drop in and learn stuff. So yesterday was like, smash out like 10 hours of learning and masterminds and practice pods and try and fit everything else in. So it's kind of grateful that, I have a house, and I'm kind of grateful that there are people out there in the community looking after those that now need stuff.
Thanks, Dan. Nancy, you're muted, Nance.
I think maybe we're on the same wavelength, because I'm feeling a particular gratitude for the availability of all of these calls. And I have not been one to avail myself of them in a consistent way. But right now, just, how Martin and Beth put out all of these different options that we have. And it reminds me of, about 4 years ago, we moved homes, just a couple of hours north of where I was born and raised. And so it's called the San Francisco Peninsula, just south of San Francisco. And on the peninsula, I was part of a yoga community that was really extraordinary, in that it was just such a sacred space. And they offered classes like morning to night every day. And, I would have periods where I would attend, very, very frequently. And a lot of times during periods of transition for myself, really, really difficult periods, it was like I could go there and it really felt like everything was okay. And that's been one of the things I've missed the most since we've moved, especially because I'm not really a natural networker. I'm more of a one-on-one person, and I'm grateful for the friends that I've made here, where I live now in Sonoma County. But it was interesting because I've realized that I have more of a network in Australia and otherwise than I do where I live. And I mean, and that's even with my not showing up all that often, but that's just how I feel. I mean, I just feel this deep gratitude for people in the world that, I can just, join with at regular intervals, and even more often if I wanted to. They're so available. And it's just really, it is a sacred space that I got to say, I mean, I think Martin's been instrumental in laying a groundwork. And I know that Noble Goldman is much wider than that, but I just think that, I guess what I've experienced is that the seeds that he's planted, I mean, look, now we have all of these new options. And so it's just really something to be able to tap in and really be, to meet with others at the heart level, like we're able to do. So deep gratitude for that.
Yeah, I love all of that, Nancy. It's and it's funny because it brings us around. You and I are resonating on the same frequency at the moment, because today was all about talk about how we cope with change. What does that look like? And then, so I guess that would be the first question, is how do we cope with change? And we'll kind of just spend 90 seconds each going around talking about that. And then the next question will be, what are your strategies for coping with change? What do you do to shift and move through that? I guess that's kind of been really prevalent in my mindset. So I'm not holding my space bar. So I'm going to set a timer, so because I am known to ramble. Okay, Siri, set timer for 90 seconds. All right, cool. So for me, when I call it the doom loop, which one of my clients actually calls it, he gets into the doom loop when we kind of get into a space where we're just going round and round in circles. And for me, what it is it's attaching a story to my emotions. So I have a feeling somewhere in my body, and instead of just feeling it, I want to attach a story to it. And when I attach a story to it, I then get into a loop, because then I'll go that story and my wife will diffuse that. So then I'll drop down a level. I also talk about spiraling up and down in our emotional intelligence. So when I get into a doom loop, I'm often going, okay, this is why I'm doing that. And then my wife will diffuse it, and then I'll find something else, and then something else. And I find myself just digging deeper and deeper and deeper down into the hole. And that's kind of where I ended up this week, really. Not in the worst place I've ever been, but certainly the disconnection in my relationship was super unhealthy. So it was interesting just how that change came about, and I had no control over our premier saying there's one case of coronavirus, so we're shutting down 2 million people. You're all getting locked down and putting masks on, which in my mind was an absolutely ludicrous overreaction, right? That's my timer. But yeah, so my response was to my belief system that our premier had made a poor decision. And then I had anger and rage attached to that, which then just oozed out of me. I call it verbal vomiting. So that was kind of, I guess, yeah. So I had an external source that I had no control over, that I let have complete control of all my emotions, essentially. So that's kind of where I was at for this week, I guess. So that's kind of been the change that's been happening. And I'll let everyone go through and talk about an experience with change or whatever they want to speak about in regard to it. And then we can talk about how we kind of shift away from that. I'll get you to unmute, Julie, and go next if you want.
I'm sort of quite blown away by your revelation, because I do that very, very frequently, especially around the corona performance around the world. So, and yes, and I'll get detached, really into a rage and start raving, and I really turn everybody away because they, it's an overreaction and almost like an excuse. And I like the fact that you say, you attach a story to your emotional feeling. I mean, I'm going through incredible change for the last 2 years. But one of the big things is I'm still here in New Zealand, and I should be back in Holland, because that's where I've been living for the last 10 years. But so I'm a constant. My life's constantly changing daily. I'm between my brother and my son's house and all this thing. So, and the mood swings are just incredible. I go from sort of euphoric to quite depressed, very, very easily. So I'm learning to monitor that too in ways. So, because we need to sort of get an even keel. It's just too much emotion that sort of grabs you, and I feel that then, especially on your down times, that you sort of just sabotaged and you don't do anything. You don't get on with anything positive. Well, that's me. I don't get on with anything positive. So I think it's very important that we can actually even talk about this right here, because I haven't talked about this with anybody really. So this is a really brilliant, safe base to be able to share these things. I think, I hope you've got the phone on, but can really relate to what you're saying there, Ori, big time. So we hopefully we can help each other just be aware of that, because you can quite easily get out of it. You can actually, we do have the ability to change state as such, and do something positive to move out of it, even if it's just something, just a routine of getting on with something that's feeling a little bit better than all the doom. I love the doom loop. Yeah. Okay. Even if it's smelling a flower and just going outside and seeing a beautiful garden, or being being blessed with your lovely family and friends and all those beautiful things.
Absolutely. And we'll drop into that. I'm sure there'll be some strategies between the four of us to help with that, all that stuff that you're talking about. I know that I have a lot of tools in that toolkit. So I'll get you to drop in, Stan, with your how you cope with change.
I think coping with change sometimes is the kind of the mindset you're coming to. Is it a change that's good for you, or is it a change that you don't think's good for you? So lately I have switched our whole house around. So basically took a 3x1 where I had one bedroom as an office, and I've now slid into what would be, I suppose, the lounge room, but was the boys' playroom. So and then separated the boys into separate rooms. So we kind of did a whole, and then you're like taking, and you're kind of resisting at the beginning because you're like, I don't really want to change. I've been in this room for 20 years and, you know, I know where everything is. And now I'm switching. And then you're like, okay, well, I wanted to declutter my house anyway. So, you know, sometimes the change is good depending on which way you kind of look at it. And obviously, you know, if you ran into Corey's doom loop, you know, or if you went the other way and ran into the kind of positive loop going upwards, you know, you could go either way, and depends on whether you're resisting it or yeah, that's about it. That's probably about my 90 seconds anyway.
Thanks, Dan. Yeah, I think that's a good point, right? And I'm kind of just framing out this doom loop at the moment for a program, and I just kind of need to think of a word that would be the opposite of doom, for the loop spiraling upwards. And a part of it for me, I guess, is acceptance, which you kind of touched on there. Just accepting things for what they are and not labeling them is kind of a critical part of the process for myself. I'll let you drop in, Nancy.
Yeah. Well, your doom loop is my do loop. So if I find myself in an uncomfortable, anxious space due to transition, I love what you said about, you know, when we have an uncomfortable energy, right? It's like we just so desperately want to attach a story, a reason, something to it, right? Because it's just so much more, it feels so much more controllable. And so I can definitely get into the do loop because I can really, I have a lot of mental energy. And my inclination can be to become ungrounded. And it's interesting because I'm often perceived, my whole life I've been kind of perceived as grounded. And the truth is that I can get very much in my head. And so I'll often want to, you know, start projects or, you know, come up with the next big idea and get too fragmented where, I become kind of ungrounded. And so, so I can relate to that sort of extremes thing, Julie, that you said, kind of that pendulum. And so, yeah, that's how it manifests for me a lot. I can't hear you, Corey.
Okay. Let's just drop in. My wife decided to print a book while I'm on the call. So what I'd like to do now is kind of drop into strategies for like coping with change. So it's interesting for me. So my response to stress is typically to retract, and I either retract by getting out on my bike and going for a long ride, which is what I've done in the past. And when I say a long ride, I mean 6, 7, 8, 9 hours, like just vanish from the world on my own up into, just stopping that, up into, so I'd ride up into the hills and then just sit up in the bush basically. So I'd just really retract from the whole world. And from there, yeah, so I retract from what I'm doing in the world, and then that kind of shifts from going out into nature and escaping from everyone and everything to going and laying in my bed for a week and having my iPad in my bedroom and not going out and being out in the space with my family. I haven't really been in those extremes for a long time, but that is kind of where that's where I kind of get to when I really get into dark spaces, but I haven't really been there for quite a while. So yeah, but how do I cope with change now? I try not to attach a story to what I've got going on. So that's really a critical path of activity for me, basically. I'm unplugging that printer, which will drive my wife crazy. So I end up in a path. So I attach a story to the emotion, right? So whatever that is. But what I've come to understand is that often emotions just are, and when we just kind of let them sit, they'll shift and move fairly quickly. But if we attach a story to them, then they end up staying with us for much longer periods of time. So if I'm attaching a story to it, I was actually in a really dark space in October last year. And as I was driving out towards the beach, I ended up just ringing a friend. I pulled over on the side of the road and called a friend because I was just breathing. So like, that's my number one thing to go to is just breath work. So just hand on the heart, hand on the belly, and just really filling my body with air. And we get into, our brain's got, like I think it's our right side of our brain operates at like 50 million moments per second or whatever it is. And on the other side, we operate at about 200. So we can have 50 million thoughts and actions on one side of our brain and 200 on the other side. And when we do breath work, and that's getting into our higher intuition, getting into our source energy. So that's essentially source has given us that capacity to respond and connect into something that's not us. Essentially, it's us, but it's not us. It's a higher source. And that's a really powerful place to be able to get into. And when I was dropping into that, I was like hyperventilating, and I just took some deep breaths just to calm myself down. And the message that I got was, call someone that's not your brain. Like, that was literally the message that I got. And I just called a friend, and I probably called the wrong person in hindsight because he didn't really have the tools to cope with that. And well, there's two ways to look at it, right? Like, it could be like he was the wrong person to call because he was able to help me, but he unraveled because he's seen me as a leader. And if I'm falling apart, then what hope has he got? That was kind of the story he attached to that experience. But ultimately he had significant growth because he went to his coach, and I rang him up later in the day and said, hey man, I'm feeling better, et cetera, et cetera. So, and I had someone call me and go, hey man, you shouldn't have really called that person, and kind of called me out on it, et cetera, et cetera. But the universe, for me, I just needed someone that I knew would answer the phone when I called them. And there was like 7 people on the list of people that I could have called, but there was only one person that I knew would pick up the phone in that moment. And that was critical to kind of the state that I was in at that time and place. So I guess for me, my strategies are, which is really hard when you're in it, like I call it like you're in a bubble, and it's so hard to punch your arm out of the bubble to reach for help when we're kind of in that emotional state. When we're in that hole, it's really difficult to like punch through and grab help. So for me, that's the one thing that I like to go and do, is to call people. Like, I really reach out to people when I need it. And the other thing I do is breath work, and then out in nature. So they're kind of my top 3 things that I do to, and then my 4th one would be to move my body basically. So, and then play with my kids, So this week essentially I ended up just getting the footy out and kicking the footy with my son. And then we've got a Nintendo Switch game, which is an exercise thing. You do exercise with this fit ring, which was way harder than I set it to, like intense level. It was way harder than I thought it would be, but just so I was exercising, having fun with my kids and just pushing myself physically. And that kind of shifted me out of the state that I was in. But it was interesting. I still had this residual thing happening yesterday where my wife would say things to me and I would attach a story to what she'd said. So it would be like, so she would make a comment around, we're watching Holy Moly, this funny game, right? It's a game on TV where golfers they hit a golf ball and then they have to do stupid obstacles and they get hurt, et cetera, et cetera. And there's a guy singing, what's the matter, you? Hey, you got some respect? Hey, shut up at your face. He was singing that song, right, while they were putting. And my wife just made an innocuous thing like, oh, can you hear the words they're saying? And I was like instantly pissed off, like, why are you having a go at me? And she potentially was or she potentially wasn't, but I get to make a choice whether I attach a story to it or not, you know. So just because my wife says something, and often in relationships, our partners say things and there's no intention, it's just, they're just speaking. And we get to make a choice whether we attach a story. It comes back to that story, right? Whether we attach a story to it or not. So I guess that's kind of my story and my coping strategies around change. You're up, Julie.
Is it me? I'm a bit slow. I like the fact that you call it attach a story. You know, I find that really good because it's a reaction through our own filter, isn't it, to what somebody said? And you're right. You have a choice, but depending on the feeling and the emotional sort of scale you're on at the time, I think, you know, as to whether it's overreaction or whatever. But I like the fact that you call it attaching a story because it is attaching a story, because we, you know, the intention from the person would not be that we've decided to. Well, I'm just talking right about me here because I'm living with people as well, and you know, it's always a bit difficult because it's not your own space, and you know, I've been on my own for a long time, so it's pretty. You know, I like my own company and I like to go out and have a bike ride and things like that, and I can't sort of do that now so much. So you know, depending on my emotional scale, I take it as a real wound that they you know, I mean, it is a story. It's a great big, yeah, they're saying that because I'm not worthy. They don't think I'm worthy. All this sort of rubbish. And yeah, I can now. I think that's really useful. Thank you, Corey, because I'll just say, oh, we can change that story, can't we? You know, just bloop, do a flip, flip the coin and stop it. But yeah, and nature again, like you. I love gardening and avid gardener and fragrant flowers, so that will also lift my spirits. You know, if I can go out and I'm lucky enough to be in a country where I can just walk out in this native bush everywhere, it's just beautiful. So that also does it. But thanks for that. Yeah, I think there are breathing also is good, and I meditate a lot as well. So that also has a, you know, a really good effect. And also music can lift me big time too, to change the mood. So some nice ideas there to shift state. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think with the story, like it's not even necessarily about swapping the story, Julie. It's just about going, I don't need a story and I can just feel what I'm feeling. Like on Australia Day, I wrote a poem about I called it an ode to my father. And it started out, I'm scared, Dad, and it was talking about his fragility and not that his death is imminent, but the fear in me was quite real. And I just wrote a poem and I just shared it I actually didn't share it into my public spaces. I just shared it into my men's groups. I was feeling quite heavy with that and quite sad with that emotion. And I said to my wife, like, was Australia Day, and we always go to the beach on Australia Day, and all I wanted to do was like lay in bed and cry, right? And that's what I said to her. She's like, "Why are you feeling that way?" Which is not helpful. It's just I was feeling that way because I was just feeling that way. But what I was able to do on Australia Day was just not attach a story to it, just have that feeling sit. Like it really sat in my heart, and I really felt quite sad. But I was able to go, and it wasn't even like we talk about putting a mask on, but I wasn't even putting a mask on. I was just going about my day while still feeling that. So I was able to like sit in the emotion and just go about my day without being loaded. You know, I snapped at my wife when we got to the place that we were going. We met there, and she made a comment about my dad, and I just kind of snapped and said, I don't want to have to talk about it. And but that was it, you know. And then my friend that was there, he reads all my stuff, so he gave me a massive hug and said, "Man, that was really heavy." I'm like, "Thanks, man. Like, let's just have a good day, you know. Like, let's just sit and enjoy each other's company, and not kind of sit in that the wallow of the sadness." So
Yeah.
we can be in our emotions without having any story to it. So I was just
Yes,
sad.
just sort of just feel it. Just feel it. Don't want to put it anywhere. Just actually go through the emotions of feeling it, because then it's sort of like a process. It sort of fixes itself because it's being acknowledged, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. And you don't let it sit, then there's never an opportunity for it to move on, right? Like
Or heal. Yeah, heal really in a way.
if you just kind of like attach a story to it, and then often when we attach a story, we lay another emotion into it. So we feel sad, and then we attach a story to it, then anger or frustration or some other bigger emotion comes into it, right?
Or blame.
Yeah, blame, shame. There's so many different layers, but I guess, yeah, so with the story, I just really important with that story stuff is to like not have to feel you even need to swap it to another story. You can just kind of feel what it is for what it is, and sit not in it. It's really important language, right? It's not about sitting in it, it's sitting with it.
You're kind of observing it.
Yeah, exactly. Stan, you're up, mate.
The big stubby fingers again. I suppose I'm a little bit the same. We often joke, I do a lot of martial arts, and we often joke that jiu-jitsu is our therapy. If you're getting on the mat and doing stuff, it's kind of it's a bit hard to be thinking about other things when someone's trying to choke you or break your arm, sort of motion. But a lot of it's just the movement in would be another thing. And we were talking about this one of the other masterminds, must have been last night, about what we do. And I always said you're allowed to experience the kind of negative stuff for as long as it takes you to make a cup of tea. And then once you've made a cup of tea, switch brains. Was kind of where I came from. So, some of the things I kind of do, take a break, have a cup of tea, get into movement. One of my favorite things to do is to kind of have a bath and watch a webinar at the same time, just to kind of let the water kind of be on you and take stuff, but learn, fill your brain up as well.
So when you talk about like that's the story that's in your mind, right? Do you still have the feeling that, like, do you feel the feeling, or do you just kind of, I guess I'm just curious, right? Because we can, like, I can let go of the story, but sometimes we throw out the baby with the bathwater, like we let go of the story and we throw the emotion out as well. And then that kind of, it loops back at some point of having to deal with whatever that trigger was. Like, so for me with my dad, when this whole COVID thing hit, like I rang him and said, like, my dad's really freaked out about this because he's 150 kilos, he's 68 years old, his wife's got a heart condition. So for them, they're high risk category. So I'm a bit blasé about the whole COVID thing because I'm fit and healthy and I don't believe that I will get it. And if I do, I'll be fine. But for my parents, that's a totally different scenario, right? So I was able to just kind of ring my dad on Monday and say, hey, Dad, if anything goes on this week, like you need anything from the shops or whatever, just ring me and let me know and I'll bring it around rather than you guys having to go out. So I had to really, I was able to like really step into that emotion of sadness I was feeling and be of service to my dad, which then really made me feel good, I guess. So I don't know if that's even a relevant story to what you're talking about or what I was trying to
Yeah,
address.
look,
But
I don't think I've been in, other than changing the house around, I don't think I've been in areas where I've had to deal with major change for probably 2 or 3 years, sort of thing. There was kind of some stuff going on with my wife, like that's why it's on now. So 4 or 5 years ago, we started having some mental health challenges, which is a whole change in itself. But I'm not sure about the feelings. That's a good question, Corey. It's not sure that I'm letting it affect me, but then again, I don't let it drive me either. If that makes
yeah,
sense.
it was just,
No,
I guess
really.
for me, that's just the question that came up, right? When I'm sitting with I call it no mind, things pop in and I feel like when they pop in, they're important. So when you talk about the cup of tea and the emotion, it's like pro teams talk about that, right? They go, and there was a team in America, they ended up winning a championship of the NBA or NFL or whatever. And the coach said to them, you have 24 hours to be upset about the loss and 24 hours to be excited about the win, which is kind of what you're talking about with your cup of tea strategy, pretty much. You know, so they don't get stuck in we're losers or we're winners. They get 24 hours to celebrate or wallow, and then they come back to business of training, you know, which is kind of what your similar strategy there.
Yeah, and I'm like I said, I don't think other than stuff, there's not a lot of major changes kind of going on. So
But yeah, and it might be nothing. It was just a question that popped into
it's kind
my
of
mind.
it's kind of smaller stuff, or hey, I'm stuck about calling somebody or putting a post up or something like that, and you're like, oh, make a cup of tea, get over it. Try and do. I suppose I've always kind of done self-care, and I kind of go out with the scouts lot for camping. So I always say it's kind of like a recharge and like sharpening the saw again all the time. So and it just kind of gets scheduled in. It's like, yeah, you kind of know that you're going to need it. Don't wait for it to blow up and spiral to the bottom of the doom cycle. Kind of catch it when you're on the lip and get out fast.
Yeah, I love that. Like, do a few days in nature, you can fully reset. I think about 48 hours. After 48 hours, I drop into liminal space, and I'm there. I did 15 days last year, and I really struggled to come back into my life. Probably too much.
the integrating.
You're yeah, lots of integration. You're up, Nancy.
Wow. There's so much that came up during everything that all of you said. I think the most recent part of that was, first of all, just, is it Stan? Yeah, Stan. I just, I think it's just so important to always have regard for our unique designs, and that our paths really truly do look different. And we are all meant to navigate life in our own ways. And so, as someone who's been so steeped in personal and spiritual growth for so long, there've definitely been times when I've found myself, it's like, oh, this person needs deeper healing or whatever comes up, like somebody's not dealing with their stuff. And that's just not mine to know. That is not mine to even say or know. And so But having said that part, you know, you brought up something interesting, that there is a term called spiritual bypassing. Have you guys ever heard that term used? Right. And so it's sort of like wanting to skip over the painful part and go to the feel good part. And I'm going to be honest and say I had some of my challenges with Noble Goldman have been in the what I've perceived in certain aspects as the masculine approach of, you know, do this step, and, you know, get to this great frame of mind kind of a thing. And the feminine aspect is the healing, the allowing for the healing. And so, and then another thing I wanted to bring up is that, so I've had some pretty massive breakdowns in my life. I've had 3 of them in the last 10 years. I had some others earlier in my life, and I'm talking about having such extreme anxiety, panic, you know, that I was not able to function. Afraid to, I mean, just like afraid to do anything, afraid to live. Just really chemistry, just so worked up that it was just really, really, really difficult. And so this last go round, which was a couple of years back, and these would play out over a number of, you know, a number of months, and really the better part of a year to be able to reemerge, if you will. It's always a rebirth that kind of occurs there. So this last time around, a couple of years back, I mean, I was just like absolutely flabbergasted and shocked that it could happen again. Like, really? I mean, I really thought, like, I'd just been so engaged on my path that how in the world could this have happened again? And so one of the big messages during that time was clear to me. And I am going to speak right now in terms of God, and I'm going to speak about Jesus, and I'm going to speak about Divine Mother, because these are very real energies for me. And I was given to know that I was to allow for these things. In other words, realizing in the past that I had in some way been like, oh, that part of me's done over, you know, like, oh, you know, I'm never revisiting that. And in that very resistance thwarts, blocks full healing, right? Because then in a way we're when we have signs of something coming up that wants to be healed or needs attention or hurts, we're trying to shut it down. And so, and then there was another really, really deep experience at the time, which was something called redemptive suffering. And I'm not saying that this needs to be a part of everybody's life, but we are not separate from each other. And I knew that the suffering that I was going through was also on behalf of humanity. Doesn't mean I'm special. It just means I knew. I was given to know that experience of redemptive suffering. In other words, when it's so freaking profound and you're processing your own, and you're also processing a lot of other suffering that is not necessarily strictly your own. And I don't know if that resonates at all with you guys, but it was nice to be able to express that.
Yeah, I absolutely feel all of that. I mean, these guys don't know. I shared with Nancy last week around my experience with, I was on the path of destruction, pretty much. Super unhealthy masculine, could sell anything to anyone. You know, like I said, it was funny. I said on a mastermind one day, Well, Martin said, I made the comment that in a past life I could sell ice to Eskimos, and Martin's response was that would make you a con man, which was interesting, right? Because, and then I sit with things. I really like that. Really, that was like a rabbit hole for me of healing, right? To heal that aspect of myself, of who I was, you know. But essentially, I'd been talking to people about becoming a coach and creating change and working with teenagers, et cetera, for, I don't know, 3 years, but didn't take any action on it. I was just like, you know what, I was making an exorbitant amount of money, driving around fast cars, just living a good life, right? And it was too easy to not let go of the money. So it was like, whether it's ego or whatever, but I was just attached to it. But the universe intervened, right? And it said, all right, Corey, we've sent you the messages. You talk to everyone about it, but you're not willing to create change. So I'm going to make the change for you. So, and essentially what that looked like was someone dying in my arms, without going into the full details of the experience. Someone died in my arms, and I was able to remain so calm while I was holding that man's heart in my hands, which is essentially what I was doing in his last moments, that I was able to remain so calm and centered that I could control a room of 100 people to save this guy, or try and save this guy. I knew in my heart that wasn't going to happen. We still had to get him out of the situation that he was in. And the moment that I passed him off to paramedics, his soul was in the room with me, and I lost time like that in an instant. My brain disintegrated. It just simply could not cope with the circumstances of what I was just involved with. It was an out of sequence event, basically. So when we have out of sequence events, they have massive impacts on our lives. When a parent loses their child, when you go to work and someone dies in your arms, that's an out of sequence event, right? So when these events happen to us, there is divine reasoning behind that. And for me, that was like the catalyst to feel not only my pain, but the pain of Brendan and my history with him, and carrying all of that forward and healing all of that. And when we have a wound, I've only just realised this recently, I did a lot of mother healing wound, and my wife made a comment to me that was really related, that made me feel unloved. And because the wound was so soft, even though I'd healed it, well, the scar was so soft, so I'd healed it, so I'd put a scar over the wound, but the scar was so soft that in that period afterwards, so when we do healing, we need to be super mindful of the next period of time until that scar hardens. Harden's probably not the right word, but it creates a shell, right? So we kind of heal that aspect of our wound. And that for me has been my divine, I guess, experience, I guess. So I just really wanted to, I guess, lay that into what you just shared, Nancy, just to, not even to validate it, just to say, hey, I see you and I hear you. We're kind of up on the hour, people, but I kind of want to just make sure everyone's okay, because we kind of went pretty deep there. So before we drop out on that, I just want to make sure, are you okay, Julie?
Yes, I am. I'm just very reflective. I'm just listening and feeling all this depth of feeling, and seeing that, you know, there's so many levels of experience, and and dealing with experience. It's it's quite mind blowing. My term for your doom cycle was a pity party. I call it a pity party. But what Nancy was saying was so much, this real breakdown, and I don't think I've experienced that, so I'm just empathizing, or maybe I've avoided experiencing it. It might have been better to have. But
You stole the words right out of my mouth, right? We have this fear to go, to break down, to get breakthrough. And we don't have to go and be stuck in breakdown. We can kind of you can really, with the right partnership, right coach, psychologist, you can really compress that experience into a very short period or a very short window. I didn't have the tools back then to do that, but now I have. I've had a rough week, so I've got an appointment with my psychologist tomorrow. I've got stuff that I want to deep dive, which I'm not going to go into here, but I'm going to rabbit hole for an hour. I've kind of parked it for now, knowing that knowing that I've got a tool in place to be able to rabbit hole into that.
I think what's come up for me right now is that there's a lot of things that I haven't kind of really faced and healed, because they keep popping back up again. So at various stages, and then you attach them to another story, as you say. But so that was lovely, and it's lovely to know. And probably I have needed to seek more help, and even professional help, which I haven't done. Always tried to do it on my own, but yeah.
That what we resist persists.
Yeah, it sure does. Sure does. So thank you all for sharing that. I really appreciate it.
Cool. Thanks, Julie.
Keep you posted.
Thanks. How are you, Stan? You all good?
Yeah, guys, all good. Thanks for sharing, everybody. I sometimes think, how do I follow that? Because I don't have any of that sort of stuff. But then sometimes you think, well, maybe I'm grateful that I don't have that stuff.
And like Nancy qualified at the front end, man. We all have our, what did she say? We all have our own. We are all meant to navigate life in our own way, and that's just it, right? We're all here on this human experience, and not everybody has the same experience. Like my wife's, she's on this journey because I'm on this journey, but she's not going to go and do her own deep work, and I've had to accept that, because if I resist it, it creates disharmony in our relationship, right? So yeah. All right. Cool, everybody.
Thank you, Corey. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Nancy. Do you want to hang for 5, Nancy, once people drop off?
I think I need to go and finish making dinner.
All right, cool. That's fine.
Thank you. Yeah, no, otherwise
worries.
I would, but I'm starting to feel like, guys, today was going to be available
Long
at
day.
6 for dinner. So,
all right, perfect.
But,
I'll see you
all right,
later.
here. Okay.
All right.
Bye.
See you, everyone. Bye.
Hello.
Thanks, everybody. Really.